All right, module 26 is going to be evaluating alerts. We're in the last week here of all the different modules. There's a couple modules in here. This one's going to deal with evaluating the alerts and being able to structure those alerts and say how they're classified, et cetera, as they go back to your SIME. So in the sources of alerts, we talked a little bit about getting all the different logs and net flows and things like that, getting back to the system or to a central core or a SIME. In this case, we're going to use Security Onion, which is an open source suite of network security monitoring tools that run on an Ubuntu Linux distribution. It provides the three main functions for cybersecurity analysts, such as full packet capture, data types, network-based and host-based intrusion detection systems, and then alert analysis tools. So it can be installed as a standalone installation or as a sensor and server platform, depending on your how you want it in your network. So some components of Security Onion that are owned and maintained by corporations, such as Cisco, Riverbend Technologies, et cetera, but are made available as open source. So for the detection and collecting of alert data, Security Onion contains a lot of different components to pull that in. It's an integrated environment in which you will be designed to simplify the deployment of a comprehensive NSM solution. So this figure is going to be the main part of what is all in a Security Onion architecture. You can see at the bottom, it's going to collect various types of data from PCAPs to content data, syslog data, everything that we've generated and talked about in the last couple modules. That will go up to the detection module, and that will use primarily Snort, Zeek, Bro, but there's also other tools available, for example, CatMe, OSEC, Waza, and Secura. And then you have analysis, and that's primarily going to focus with your Wireshark, as well as SQL and Kibana. So you can see all the different descriptions of what's all going through here. Again, the main ones that you guys are going to be working with is going to be Snort and Zeek, et cetera. Zeek is formerly known as Bro. It's a newer version. So for what you guys will be using in this particular section is SQL. Again, this is going to provide a high-level console for investigating security alerts from a wide variety of sources. SQL is going to start as a starting point for your investigation of different security alerts, and then many data sources are available by pivoting directly from SQL to other tools. So Kibana is going to be an interactive dashboard to the Elasticsearch data. This is going to allow it to query NSM data, provide flexible visualizations of that data, and then make it possible to pivot from SQL directly into Kibana so you can see contextualized displays. So again, you're going to start in SQL, you'll end up pivoting over to Kibana to get a nice interactive dashboard for it, search through the data, et cetera, and then you can see straight through there. Wireshark's going to allow you to dive deeper into the packet captures. You've done a little bit of Wireshark analysis so far, so this would allow you to analyze what part was captured and then dive deep into that packet. And then Zeek itself is a network traffic analyzer that serves as a security monitor. It's going to inspect all the traffic on a network segment and enable an in-depth analysis on that data. So pivoting from SQL to Zeek provides access to very accurate transition logs, file content, and customized output. Security alerts are going to be notification messages generated by the NSM systems or security devices. Those alerts can come in many forms depending on the source. In Security Onion, the SQL is going to provide a console that integrates alerts from multiple sources into a timestamp queue. And so that cybersecurity analyst can work through the security queue, investigating, classifying, escalating, or retiring those alerts. Those alerts are generally including in the 5 tuples of information, which is known as the timestamps and information identifying which devices and system gets generated by the alert. So this is important on this tuple thing because you guys will be doing some labs over this. The source IP is going to be the first part, then the source port, the destination IP and the destination port, and then the IP protocol number for the event. So is it IPv4 or IPv6? So in these alerts, you'll see something like this, which is the SQL dashboard here. You're going to see an open queue of different alerts that come in there, of things that have been reported to it. And so the ST column is going to be the status of the event. It's different color coded based on priority. There's 4 different priority levels: very low, low, medium, and high. And the colors range from a light yellow to red as the priority increases. Then you have the CNT column down the middle, or down the left-hand side, is going to be the count for the number of times this event's been detected from the same source and destination IP addresses. This is going to help determine the set of events that have correlated between each other. So it's going to analyze all this data. If it starts noticing that some of these are very, tied together for the alerts, the source and destination IPs, it starts clumping them up. So the more you see, like for example, line 6 down here, then you're going to see that there's a lot of events happening around this type of thing. In the sensor area, this is going to be the agent that's reporting the event. So there's different sensors available, and their identifying numbers can show up there, found in the agent tab, agent status tab of the pane, which appears below this event. So you can see this agent status down here, and that's going to give you more information about the sensor that triggered this one. The alert ID that you see out here in the middle is a two-part number that represents the sensor that had reported the problem, and then the event number for that particular sensor. The date and timestamp is obvious there for the time and event. Remember that everything's using NTP so that they're all on the same timestamp. Your event message over here to the right is going to be the identifying text for the event. It's typically configured for a rule that's been triggered by that alert, and then the associated rule can be viewed in the right-hand pane, the one down here on the lower right-hand side, just above the packet data. And to display that, you just have to click this checkbox right here for show rule. Alerts can come from a different number of sources like we talked about. So on the NIDS side, remember NIDS is going to be your network intrusion detection systems. This is going to be your Snort, your Zeek, and Securita. You're also going to have your HIDS, which are the host-based intrusion detection systems such as OSEC and WASA. And then you have asset management and monitoring. This is going to be your PADS, or passive asset detection system. For HTTP, DNS, and TCP transactions, you're going to get those recorded by Zeek, and those are going to come in the form of PCAPs. Remember, PCAPs are packet capture files. And then you also have syslog messages. And remember, we have everything funneling back to a central syslog server. That information found in those alerts or displayed in the SQL will differ in message format because they come from different sources. And so the SQL alert in the figure was triggered by a rule that was configured inside of Snort. And we can see that here. And if we look up closer to the rule, we can see specifically what triggered within this Snort value. So when it comes to Snort rules and structures, they consist of two sections as shown by the figure. So you have the rule header, which is this up here, and then the rule options down below. And that rule location is sometimes added by SQL there as well. So the rule header is going to be something like alert IP any to any. And this contains an action that needs to be taken, source and destination addresses and port, and then the direction of the flow. We have a rule option. In this case, we're going to message GPL attack response ID, check returned route. This is going to include any kind of messages that need to be displayed, details, packet content, source ID, any additional things that reference this particular rule. And then the rule location down here, which is going to be the file that we have in the rule, that's going to explain that, and that's added by that to indicate the location of that. So we write different rules, which is like this one here, which is triggering to know that we're have a signature that's trying to return a root user or a root ID. And therefore, when it catches that kind of traffic going through here, that it's going to raise a flag so that you can figure out why somebody's accessing root across there. In the rule header, it's going to contain different actions, protocol addressing, port information, etc. that's shown in this figure. Again, that's what's highlighted here in blue. That structure of the header portion is consistent between Snort alert rules, and therefore Snort can be used to configure variables that represent internal and external IP addresses. So here it's just doing any, but you can define it much more detailed than that. In the rule options, you're going to have the rule that's a variable. This is the portion of the rule that's enclosed in parentheses as shown in that previous figure. So if we go back and look, again, this is the parentheses section of it, which is the options that are all set. And that contains the text message that identifies the alert. It also contains the metadata about the alert, such as the URL. And then that message may include some of the things from the source. So for example, it's common to include the GPL, so older snort rules that were created by SourceFire, distributed under the General Protection License. That rule set is not Cisco Talos certified. And so that GPL rule set can be downloaded from the Snort website and is included within Security Onion. Again, there's many other tools out there. The ones that they're going to describe in here are open source tools. When you are out in the real world, you may see some of these open source tools, but like, for example, some of this you may see as more advanced tools that we talked about out there. The ET is going to be the snort rules from emerging threats. This is a collection point for snort rules from multiple sources. The emerging threats rule set contains rules from multiple categories, a set of ET rules included with Security Onion, and this emerging threats is a division of profit point or proof point. On the VRT rules, these are rules that are immediately available to subscribers and are released to registered users 30 days after they were created. With some limitations, they are now created and maintained by Cisco Talos. So there's different rule sets. You can write your own snort rules, or you can subscribe to different lists to get updates that were continuously pumped into your product. You can get on a subscription list and things like that that will help get you those rules if you're not writing those out for your own particular case. Note that generally Snort itself is open source. However, these rule lists or distribution lists can sometimes cost money. And so, like I said, you subscribe to them. So within this rule structure, you can see these different things. I'm not going to dive too deep in there, as you can see it on the screen. So you guys will go through a lab in this module that will go through and show you how to perform live monitoring of intrusion detections and events. You'll create your own custom firewall rules and stop internal hosts from contacting malware hosting server, and then craft packets, etc. through there. So it's a really good lab. You should be familiar with this. Everything that you've been studying so far in this section is starting to build up to this week. So you're getting into these modules now that is putting everything you've learned about IP header and refreshing all that. You're now going to be analyzing that type of stuff in these tools. So for alert evaluation, the threat landscape is constantly changing, as you can see there, new vulnerabilities, threats, etc. And so a user and organizational needs will change, and so does that attack surface. Remember, your attack surface is all the areas that you have that could potentially be vulnerable to threat actors. And so they've learned to act quickly and vary features of their exploits to evade this detection. It's sometimes better to have alerts that are generated by innocent traffic than it is to have rules that are missed by malicious traffic. And so it's necessary to have a skilled cybersecurity analyst investigate these alerts and determine if the exploit has actually occurred. And so that's what we're training you to be within this class, is to be that first tier cybersecurity analyst, which will typically work through these queues of alerts in a tool like SQL, pivoting to use tools like Zeek and Wireshark and Kibana, and verify whether that alert represents an actual exploit. And then at that point, you may be a tier 2 where you can hand it off and somebody goes and fixes the exploit, or you find out whether there's an actual alert that goes in there. Security incidents are typically classified using a scheme borrowed from medical diagnosis or diagnostics. This is going to be a classification scheme that's used to guide actions and evaluate diagnostic procedures. And the concern is that either the diagnosis can be accurate, true, inaccurate, or false. And so in a cybersecurity analysis or a network analysis, the analyst must present with an alert, and then it needs to determine if that diagnosis is true. You'll either have a true positive, in which the alert has been verified to be an actual security incident. You could have a false positive, in which the alert does not indicate an actual security incident. Benign activity that results in a false positive is sometimes referred to as a benign trigger. And then you have an alternative situation in which the alert was not generated, and the absence of an alert can be classified as a true negative, in which no security incident has occurred and the activity is benign. Or you have a false negative, in which undetected incident has occurred. So again, it's very similar to the medical field, where you're talking about positives and whether it's benign traffic or not necessarily malignant in this case, but full threat actors actually doing events. The main ones that are scary are these false negatives because those are dangerous. They indicate that an exploit was not detected by the security systems that are currently in place. So this one passed and we didn't get any kind of alert. It's one thing to get an alert and then not um, be able to investigate that or overlook it, etc. But to not get any alert at all and actually have an exploit done is a bad situation. So benign events are those that should not trigger alerts. Excessive benign events indicate that some rules or other detectors need to be improved or eliminated. So when true positives are suspected, a cybersecurity analyst was required to escalate the alert to a higher level for investigation. That investigator will move forward with the investigation in order to confirm the incident or identify any potential damage that may have been caused. And so a cybersecurity analyst may be responsible for informing security personnel that false positives are occurring to the extent that the security analyst's time is seriously impacted. False negatives may be discovered well after an exploit has already occurred, and this can occur in retrospective security analysis or RSA. That typically occurs when there's a newly obtained rule or other threat intelligence applied to archive security data. And so, for that reason, it's important to monitor threat intelligence to learn new vulnerabilities and exploits, and then evaluate the likelihood that the network was vulnerable to them at some point in the past. So, not only do you possibly miss things, but when you implement new security rules and it goes against your back data, that you may find that you did actually have an exploit at some point in time. You just didn't have a rule that actually triggered that. So, in deterministic analysis and the risk based of what's known as vulnerability, this is a type of risk analysis that describes that worst case. Probabilistic analysis estimates the potential success of an exploit by estimating the likelihood, if one step in an exploit had successfully been completed, that the next step would also be successful. And so, this deterministic analysis of all the information to accomplish an exploit is assumed to be known. In a probabilistic analysis, it is assumed that the port numbers will be used and can only be predicted by some degree of confidence. And so there's two different approaches here that you're trying to go for. A deterministic analysis is going to be for an exploit to be successful. All prior steps of the exploit must be successful, and therefore the analyst knows the steps for a successful exploit. However, with a probabilistic analysis, statistical techniques are used to determine the probability that a successful exploit will occur based on the likelihood that each step in the exploit is succeeded. So there's just two different ways to approach the same thing, knowing that this is going to be using more statistical techniques in order to determine whether it may be viable. All right, so to summarize this module, we're going to be using Security Onion, which is an open source security of network security monitoring tools that's built on an Ubuntu Linux distribution. It provides tools that cover the three core functions for a cybersecurity analyst, which is full packet capture and data types, network-based and host-based intrusion detection systems, and then alert analysis tools. Security Onion is going to integrate the data and IDS logs into a single platform through the following tools. SQL, again, is going to be your starting point for your investigations and looking at security alerts. You may then pivot to Kibana, which is an interactive dashboard interface to the Elasticsearch data. The Elasticsearch data is all the combination of all the logs that come in and then get classified within a database. Then you can use Wireshark in order to do packet capture analysis integrated within Security Onion. And then Zeek is going to be your network traffic analyzer and serves as your security monitor. Snort is going to be your network intrusion detection system. It's an important source of an alert data that's been indexed by the SQL analysis tool. Alerts can be classified as true positives or false positives. In an alternate situation, when the alert was not generated, in the absence of the alert, it can either be a true negative or a false negative. Remember, false negatives are the most dangerous, as something happened, but it was not alerted. The deterministic analysis evaluates risk based on what's known about the vulnerability, while probabilistic analysis estimates the potential success of an exploit by estimating the likelihood that if one step in the exploit was successful, that the next step will also be successful.